Hollywood in turmoil. Will the bosses sustain their billion-dollar grift? Last year, the 7 or 8, I think the 8 main Hollywood cartel, respectable men of society made like 790 or 700 and something million dollars together. 8 dudes. These guys are pulling in billions over a few years. And the amount of money, like Apple is one of these companies, the amount of money that these companies have on hand and the profits they're making are enormous, and they won't share it with the people who produce the profits. The ghouls at the top control the gates. All they do is sit there and they just flip switches about where money flows. And they have meetings and they get to tell each other how fancy they are, and they get to donate their ill-gotten gains to universities and get their butt kicked because they have all this philanthropy that they get to do, because it comes back in the form of getting to go to, fancy dinners and get their name on a building and get their ass kissed, and people respect them and everybody laughs at their jokes. I think that's the number one drug of power, actually. People laugh at your jokes. Have you ever been around a boss of any kind? You got a good one, fucking idiot boss. You're expected to laugh. People laugh at what powerful people just say. It's gross. Anyway, so it's happening. The writers are going to go on strike, at least unless online somehow today they've, in the last couple hours, have settled it, and I'm saying the wrong thing. But this hit the news yesterday. I guess the deadline was yesterday. Today is July 13th. Yesterday was the 12th, and the deadline was last night at midnight, I think. The word came out, and it came out through this been all over Twitter, through this headline here in the on deadline.com. Hollywood Studios WJ strike endgame is to let writers go broke before resuming talks in fall. So this is about leverage. This is about how society offers different switches of it to different people. So we don't want equal negotiation. They don't. Our world doesn't. I do. You should. But our society does not want equal negotiation. They don't want people of equal standing to negotiate. They prevent that from happening by concentrating power using violence enforced protections. We call that ownership. If you're invested in the company, if you're a stakeholder, by the word stakeholder could be very small, could also all ranging all the way up to like major institutional investors and stuff like that. The executive class, the management class, they own, and so they control, and so they usually have more leverage. And part of the reason they have leverage is because, and this isn't just the Hollywood bosses, this is all media bosses and all bosses of all stripes. The society is designed so that not obeying their commands can be harmful to your life. Not submitting, not being subjugated the way that they insist that you are, might mean you can't live affordably where you live, and you might become homeless, or you might have to move, or you might have to give up things, or you might not be able to afford to live somewhere safe or whatever. Like, there's all sorts of reasons. I'm doing a terrible job articulating that. And that's because they have walled off human needs. We allow profit taking to come from the false scarcity of human needs. So it's utterly fucking gross. And this example illustrates it incredibly well, regarding the human need for housing and safety and protection from the elements and protection from other people, because other people are dangerous, because we also don't deal with the foundational roots of bad decisions, let's say, or mental illness that develops, or the desperation that drives the what makes crime, quote unquote, happen. So this is the key part here. This is the one that went kind of big on this whole chunk right around here on Twitter. Receiving positive feedback from Wall Street since the WGA went on strike May 2nd, Warner Brothers, Discovery, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Paramount, and others have become determined to break the WGA, as one studio exec blatantly put it. They want to break him. They want to make them submit. They're stepping out of their lane, because this proves that it's all about control. And because they've walled off human needs, they've enclosed around things humans need to live: food, housing, healthcare, electricity, safety, love. They are able to impose harm on people. Union busting, for instance, just a quick aside, is bullying. Union busting is the deliberate infliction of psychological harm upon your workers in hopes that they will re-subjugate themselves to your will. That's exactly what Cenk Uygur did at the Young Turks when he did the union busting there. That's what all union busters are trying to do. They're intentionally hurting people by making their life stressful and difficult in order to persuade them to not sustain some kind of uprising. It's always about control. It's always about sustaining the leverage differential that we bake into the system. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get rid of the right to have unions at all, or strikes at all, like in different ways. And that is something that gets litigated, is what industries are allowed to strike. And there are certain kind of, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of plucky reporters and people out there on the internet doing some good work trying to keep track of it. But most of the media and most of the funding there's very little funding for like pro-labor, pro-worker, comparatively speaking to the capitalist funded media organizations, which are basically, these places plus a whole bunch of others too. All right, second paragraph. To do so, remember, they're going to break the WGA. To do so, the studios and the AMPTP believe that by October, most writers will be running out of money after 5 months on the picket line and no work. Hey, good news, guys. These people might not be able to afford to eat in like 5 months. So it'll be easier for us to fuck them over then. The end game, this is quoting, the end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses, a studio executive told Deadline. Acknowledging the cold as ice approach, several other sources reiterated the statement. One insider called it a cruel but necessary evil. What? These are monsters. These are evil people. They're offering evil. They're saying we are doing evil. And not only is it evil, it's necessary. We have to do it. It's required. And it's cruel. And that's why we're doing it. That, to me, shows the entire fucking scam of capitalism, of this entire deal. They call it, they know it's cruel. They know it's wrong. But to them, it's necessary because they're required to maximize profits. Their legal charter insists that they could be sued for not maximizing profits. It's evil codified into these corporations. Look what they want to do. They want to make these people homeless. Like, imagine you having to like negotiate with another person, and they're going to hold off until you can no longer sleep indoors before that they're willing to talk to you about coming to some kind of arrangement while they're raking in fucking short ass goddamn cord. Why do I have a short fucking cord? Look at how little this is. I need it in there though. I do have some other cords around here. So, this other person says, well, I'm not going to deal with you until you're homeless, until you're so desperate that you can't afford to live indoors. Either you're going to be sleeping in your car, you're going to be sleeping somewhere else's place, you're going to be, moving out of state or moving somewhere much cheaper, or homeless. Like, they want these people suffering. They want them in pain in order to maximize their leverage, in order to gain their leverage over the folks who's very over writers and over the people who they're completely dependent on. This is where AI comes in, because because what they see AI as just like, well, we don't have to negotiate. There's no homelessness with AI. There's no leverage really here. We just have computer programmers that we give orders to. Of course, there's a lot of less reported like human elements to the way these AI systems work, that the chat the chat GPTs and stuff. There's a lot of like low paid people that are behind the backbone, somewhere deep in the backbone of that. But yeah, this whole thing has been just flying around Twitter. This big chunk here. I'll just read the fourth paragraph of this little bit here. The studios and streamers next think financially strapped writers would go to WGA leadership and demand that they restart talks before what could be a very cold Christmas. In that context, the studios and streamers feel they would be in a position to dictate most of the terms of any possible deal. These are rotten humans, and they're rewarded for it. They have millions of dollars. They have expensive lawyers. They have vast teams. This AMTPT, same one of the law firms. I don't know how many law firms they have. It's plausible that they have more than one. But when I was looking at some of the Young Turks union busting shit, one of the law firms TYT hired is the same law firm that brags on its website about representing the AMPTP. Isn't that an interesting detail? I'm not sure what you're supposed to conclude from that, but they're like a big, legacy and Hollywood entertainment. They're called Mitchell Silverberg and Nupp, and their website brags about being AMPTP representation, and they're on the paperwork in the NLRB filings. So yeah, it's sick, man. Not a surprise that TYT is a union busting company too. Then it all kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, it's just utterly stunning. So there was a huge blowback to this, and apparently they had issued some statements like trying to pull this back because they use these trades, they use these magazines and these websites to, what's the word? Float. There's a word, floating out ideas or something. There's a word for that. Let's just let MeansTV tell us about it. I like Sam Sachs. I like his cool guy demeanor and voice.
Day 72 of the Hollywood writers' strike, and studio executives are now admitting that their strategy is to starve out their workers. Currently, there are no negotiations underway for a new labor contract, and that's exactly how the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers want it. Source with the group told Deadline that they are avoiding talks with the union through the fall. By then, the studio believes on-strike writers will have run out of money. Source with the AMPTP told Deadline explicitly, quote, "The endgame is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses." Source added that the strategy was, quote, "cruel but necessary." At which point, the studios believe, according to Deadline, quote, "financially strapped writers would go to WGA leadership and demand they restart talks before what could be a very cold Christmas. In that context, the studios and streamers feel they would be in a position to dictate most of the terms of any possible deal." Hard to believe these studio pricks would just admit that to reporters, because it really puts this labor conflict into perspective. On the one hand, you have struggling writers who face a very real risk of going broke and getting evicted in the next few months. And on the other hand, you have extremely wealthy studio executives who can hold out for as long as it takes. So it's pretty easy to see which side has all the money and needs to share it in a new labor agreement.
Yeah. The money that those execs have is money that belongs to the writers and the other workers and all the other laborers who produce these things. Everybody except them. That's what's so fucking twisted about this thing. Do you need someone to make decisions? Do you need to have some kind of leadership structure? Yeah, I think you do, especially with any kind of large grouping of people. By large, I mean bigger than 5. Like, it doesn't take a lot of people for things to get confusing. Of course, you need leadership. But we run these things through these dictatorships called corporations, and the consumer suffers, the workers suffer, the laborers suffer. We're working them to bits. A big part of the IATSE strike threat that was a couple of years back was all about just the unbelievably stressful, difficult hours and the burnout that was happening because of these turnaround times for these films and these shows were onerous. And that's all at the behest of people who are sitting on yachts, sitting in mansions, riding around in their private car, being driven around in limos and cars and driving fancy things and having enough money to buy Maseratis in 20,000 years and buying politicians and manipulating media. And the amount of leverage on that side is enormous. And it's money that they had nothing to fucking do with earning it. That was terrible English, but you know what I meant. The writers did the work. The writers created the ideas. Everything sources from that initial DNA packet. But then you also had all the actors and the directors and the people who we know of. But there's the crew, the editors, the pre, the post, the during. There's so much work goes into that stuff. I get annoyed when people talk about how like Hollywood crew is just like standing around or whatever. It's like those people are miracle workers. It is a very physically demanding job being on any kind of set. Usually you're standing a ton, you're carrying around all kinds of heavy equipment. It's incredibly easy to trip and hurt yourself. Like there's safety. You have to be careful because you're building scaffolding. Not that I've done, I mean, I've done a lot of smaller shoots. I haven't done like big professional ones, but like the risks that are at play, they're building sets, they're building scaffolding, they're using their time, their talent. They're barely getting sleep because of the turnaround time. The people who are living in this comfortable web, this cocoon of security and safety and luxury and privilege, money flowing into them, just filling up. They're all just ticks. They're all just fucking swollen ticks embedded in this thing. They're parasites in the brainstem because they get to make decisions that then activate other humans, people who actually do the work, whose labor, whose time, whose talent actually produces. And then they're the ones that are doing gig work and side work and living 2 or 3 or 4 people to a point. You know what I mean? Like they have to, people buddy up for rent reasons and can't afford homes. And so that's what a major response to the whole deal about making writers go broke and homeless before they negotiate with them is that people are saying, well, we already are. That's why we're striking, motherfucker. And besides, writers are scrappy ass people. Anybody who's in LA, I hope to get into writing here in LA. I feel like I have multiple talents, not just speaking words, but also writing words. I absolutely didn't have what it takes to get to be a writer. I think a huge problem for me is my horrible networking abilities. I'm so fucking bad at that. But yeah, I didn't have it. I didn't have, I hold out hope that some hacker will take the couple of scripts I wrote and then send them to one of their friends, and they make them into Academy Award winning Netflix shows. I don't care if it's on Netflix. I'm saying like Academy. I'm not going to act like I wouldn't do that, but it takes so much scrappy resourcefulness to have a successful career in this stuff, especially since the advent of streaming, which we're going to get into a little bit too. Not too much, but and so like threatening them with homelessness doesn't really work. They're already like on the edge. That's why they're out there. And they can band together, and there's enough resources, and they can create a big enough of a stink. There's a lot of people, and now the actors are going to get into this too.